Hello and welcome to a Building Smart webinar. Thank you for joining. My name is Ra Twilly and I will be your moderator today. Today's webinar is titled How to Implement bSDD and IDS with Planoly, a step-by-step guide. Our speakers are Clive Jordan, co-founder at Planoly, the BIM management platform, and Akos Hamar, also co-founder of Planoly. Planoly recently joined as a standard member of bSDD International, so we look forward to their involvement in helping develop more services with their tools moving forwards. The webinar is scheduled to last 30 minutes with a short Q&A at the end. The webinar is being recorded and will be made available for replay on our website. I would like to remind you that your phone lines will remain muted for the duration of this webinar. If you have any questions or wish to make comments, please use the chat function located within the control panel. I would also like to bring to your attention that bSMART is committed to ensuring that participation in the development of standards is unrestricted, and the process for their adoption is transparent, and standards that are developed do not favor any particular provider and are open, non-binding, and accessible to all. Please take note of our antitrust code of conduct. And now I will hand over to Clive.
Perfect. Let me know you can see my screen.
Yes, that is working.
Great stuff. Thank you so much. Yeah, and it's a pleasure to be here, but it's a great feeling to be involved with bSMART and partnering and sharing some of the work that we've done as a team. And there will be a lot more coming as well, I assure you. So today we're going to talk about bSDD and IDS. Primarily, we're going to start with what are they? Then we're going to really understand why they're important, why we should use them on projects. Forgive us for the very poor analogies and the very poor gifts. I'll say that ahead of time. We'll talk about how this will be the bulk of the presentation, the step-by-step simple implementation, and then we'll leave you with some best practices and some resources to get started as well. So we talk about standards. I think a lot of people have seen something similar, or if not this exact cartoon, talking about having a lot of standards, but being that there's a need for more in order to consolidate standards. And there's sometimes a misunderstanding, I think, due to a few different reasons behind that. Why is that? Well, we as an industry, we say all projects are different. So my project's different from your project, so therefore maybe it needs a different standard. Companies have their own processes that they follow, and they might need a different way of doing something. And then it has been potentially difficult. A lot of standards get shared as PDF files or Excel files. Sometimes it's difficult to get access to them. So this is why solution number one, the bSDD, the bSMART Data Dictionary, is really important. And what is the bSMART Data Dictionary? I hear everyone ask. A lot of people are using these abbreviations. When we talk about bSDD, we're referring to the bSMART Data Dictionary. And it's a web-based service that hosts classifications and properties along with their translations potentially. And this is a link to it. And why not? Let's take a look. So if we're in a web browser, we can search the bSMART Data Dictionary. In this example, if I use a wall, it's finding a list of what are called domains. So these are essentially different types of standards or companies that are publishing. And that might include, when I search for wall, certain items in a classification and also in properties. And this is able to be seen online. And it's a simple access if you wanted to use that link to go and find it and search for it. However, oh, and yeah, we should say what bSDD is like. So if I like the puzzle analogy here, when you're creating a puzzle, when you're putting together a jigsaw, bSDD is like the border pieces. So once you've got all of the border pieces together, it's much easier to do the rest. Yeah. Wouldn't you agree?
Not bad, but let me help you out there. So maybe it's like a GPS for construction data that helps you navigate and then avoid from getting lost in the sea of information.
That's a good one. That's a good one. And what about if you're playing a game and you need a referee, so a sports referee? They ensure that the project is fair and you have consistency. That's very similar to bSDD. Yeah.
Right. Or a library catalog that helps you finding a book that you need.
That's a pretty good one. Yeah. Yeah. Like a personal assistant that might help you find and organize the construction data, make it accessible for you. Something like that.
Or a treasure map, a compass, something like that.
A treasure map. Yeah. Like leading through a maze of construction data. Yeah. Or a musical conductor, maybe, that brings harmony, and structure to your construction project. Anyway, all of these analogies, what we're trying to say is that bSDD really harmonizes because everyone's pulling from the right source of data, the same source of truth, and following the standard that is applied on that project. So we've got this list of classifications. It's online. It's great. It's the right version. People aren't sharing Excel files or PDFs or searching through other forms. But how do we, when we use those on a project, how do we exchange the information? Well, we all know that it's still exchanged using Excel. Yeah, everything can be a spreadsheet, right? But the problem with using spreadsheets is that Excel, when you work with Excel, even though you can have some great successes, so when you create your first VLOOKUP, it might feel like you're playing Jenga and you pull out a piece that's almost a dead cert to cause the tower to fall down, but it remains standing, and it's a standing ovation, and you pat yourself on the back. But unfortunately, when you work with Excel, it does get more cumbersome, and when you add more rows and columns and formulas and pivot tables, and you start to experience circular error messages.
I saw people acting like on the left side. Unfortunately, I'm probably the one on the right side, but I think it's even worse because it's not only yourself using the Excel. You have to share information, you have to share data, and if you receive a sheet, you don't know how you ended up with those results. So it's really not a communication tool that we need for these complex processes.
Absolutely, absolutely. So in step solution number 2, the IDS. So when we're talking about IDS, it refers to an information delivery specification. And the reason why we need to standardize not just the properties and the classifications, we can use those to create lots of different spreadsheets, as we were saying, that might be that you can read a file, but it's not in a machine readable format that's always the same way that can be relied upon. Everyone can do lots of different things with a spreadsheet. However, the IDS is this computer readable file that aligns people's understanding of how to create a set of requirements so that you can, how to specify them so that they can be created and then checked in the same way that they have been specified. So IDS, if we've got some analogies there, it's maybe like a translator so that everyone can use maybe their own language or their own software, but when it comes to project requirements, they can exchange and it can be translated, it can be understood, and everyone speaks the same language. Is that fair?
Yeah, if it's a translator, it's like then a bridge between two languages. What do you think about that?
Yeah, on a project where maybe you've got construction data being blended seamlessly like a chameleon, or a musician that really understands the nuances of his piece, but he needs to explain it in a way that everyone else can understand. Maybe something like that.
It's like a remote control that brings together different parties and stakeholders on the project.
The good one, a universal remote control that's just used for everything. Absolutely. And we could go on with these fantastic analogies. Please put your best ones in the chat.
I saw some already, actually.
I see some already. Fantastic. So let's get into the meat of today. We're going to talk about both of these standards working together, both of these being useful to create a standardized set of requirements that can be translated in a way into other software that can be understood and used to create the deliverable, and then also brought back in to check the deliverable, all whilst using maybe different tools, potentially different languages, different ways of doing things, but a standardized way of defining and communicating. So I'm going to jump into Plannerly. It's a web browser-based tool that allows us to create inside of accounts a project. And the project that we're going to create is simply going to have 3 different steps that we'll go through. The primary one that we'll focus on is the scoping. And we'll also talk about how we can export those machine readable and also human readable outputs so that other tools can also use what's being created. I would be amiss just to not mention the plan step, because it's a very important piece to the workflow of any project where you're creating project-based documents, anything from project information requirements to appointment documentation, mobilization steps, etc. If you don't have a template or a Word document that you're using at the moment, we also have the ability to use AI to generate your documents, a complete document in a single click without having anything. It's like magic. I think a lot of people are using a lot of AI at the moment. If you have a document, a template, like a BIM execution plan that's very applicable in this workflow, one click would create that document for us, and we can see that a database-driven document is generating fields that come from, for example, the project name, different dates, etc. And all of this is being generated automatically. So that Akash can be involved in the project, I'm going to invite Akash to be part of this just simply by adding Akash as his email. And I'm going to give Akash management rights on this project as well. So in a couple of clicks, I've invited Akash so he can now collaborate with us as well and go through the process of approving these documents. So the bulk of what we would like to talk about is in project requirements. And if I move from the agreements or the documents into the scoping side of things, again, very similar like we had in the plan, we have also the ability to have a library of information requirements. But let's come back to that and start from the basics and show you where the bSDD and the IDS pieces come really into play. The first part, if I start from scratch and add a new element, let me turn on the classification codes, for example, in here as well. And if I am maybe the wall example that we shared before. So now if I type in, if I bring up a cell and I'm now typing something in here, what this is now doing is searching the buildingSMART data dictionary. And maybe oh, there we go. Okay. It is searching the buildingSMART data dictionary, and it brings up all of the different instances that meet that requirement. I only have to type in 3 letters and it will start searching. If I click on the walls here, you can see that we'll bring in a code. It will bring in the naming, specifically exactly how that has been defined in that dictionary.
And it brought in a certain classification because you decided in the very beginning which domain you might want to link to. So you showed, I think, on the data dictionary website that there are different domains that we can link to. So now you were reading Uniclass as one of the public domains available on buildingSMART data dictionary.
Perfect. Yep. Great point to make. We, in the project settings, would set this to be a domain for your classification structure, and also a domain for your properties. And these two are now being referenced if they were being used as a part of the project agreement as a data field, and also when we start creating in the scope, that's what is being searched for inside of the rows and the cells when you're creating content inside of the grid. So if we've done this before, let's jump to, here's one I defined earlier. I'm going to delete this one, and I'm going to delete this row. And then we'll grab something like we did in the plan from the library. There are a whole bunch of things that we can grab from templates or previous projects that you might have worked on. And in this example, let's grab the responsibility matrix for the architectural scope and also for the structural scope. And as we grab these, what we're bringing in as well is a bunch of content related to the different milestones on the project, maybe, and different responsibilities, dependencies between tasks, etc. If I close the library, we will see that if I open up the structural content, there are, let's see maybe the entity types. Let's open these. So we've got certain naming convention, and we could check this if I was to do this, and actually I realized that I'm bringing in something that is not part of the classification that I have, so that would be flagged as well. But let's work through this as an example. So we've got column foundations that have an IFC entity type columns themselves, stairs. We might have IFC stair as being the entity, and each one of these also has a set of properties that might also be part of our standard. And those standards are available both in an information drawer at the bottom, and also if we were to say the asset information model, it requires at the moment just the concrete finish. But again, if we're searching through in our properties for maybe a material and it's not something that's in our project already, it would be using the bSDD to search for example, the material type that is being required. And now we've got the material type being added here as well, and material type being shown.
So just to, sorry, yeah. Just to spend a little bit more time on this grid. So what we see is really first setting up the milestones, which milestones can be, of course, traditional design phases, but we much more think it could be BIM use cases, maybe purposes, why we are creating the model, why we are doing BIM on a project. And in this grid of milestones and tasks to be carried out, we can differentiate and define how the certain elements have to be developed from a geometrical perspective, but also who is responsible for them at a given point in time, and what are the information requirements added, and how they develop, and if there is a kind of data drop or how we pass on responsibilities, all can be communicated in a very easy to understand way.
Absolutely. Yep. All following the principles of the ISO 19650 framework, using level of information need. In this case, that was something also we defined as a setting in the project settings. This material type, we could define a rule and maybe a set of values. In this example, where we've got a material ready, there are a set of comma separated values that are required as part of that. Let's also talk quickly about the library, where you might have properties that are defined following the COBie requirements. It's something that I know that buildingSMART very much alignment and also understanding of how we can not just create deliverables and exchange them between teams, but also how we can build that as built set of requirements as well. So this is where that set of requirements might come in. Jumping from here, this is an interface. So you could use Excel, you could use other tools potentially to create something that then would be exported as a machine readable version. But we also have requirements for human readable. So not just human readable in this grid, but also being able to create an export of a set of contract requirements. So let's say, for example, that the asset information model and the requirements for this, which is CON, a contractor delivering a certain set of requirements at the end of the project is needed. In the exports drawer, we're able to export. This is where we'll show the XML for the IDS. But here we might also want to generate, wrapped in your BIM execution plan, the details for the asset information model that is just assigned to the contractor. And in a simple click, we can generate a document that is now filtering all of those requirements, that becomes a human readable output with a nice cover page and all of our details in here. Let's go to the outline and see. So we're looking at now all of these requirements for walls and flooring and everything else that we defined inside. So this might be a PDF that you would want to get a signature on. I doubt that teams would read the IDS and use that as the human readable form. We'll show you what that looks like in a second. But if we needed to get a signature on this, and I'm going to ask Akosh to sign this as well. And I've asked for 2 approvals, myself and Akosh. So if let me review this, and I'm going to sign it, sign my life away here and approve it. So I add my signature. It shows that it's in review. Oh, and Akosh has signed it as well. Perfect. Thank you very much. Now we have our perfect signature. I don't think that will hold up in court, but yeah, now we have our signatures on a human readable contract that is wrapped in the details that we talked about before. Once we have that defined, we're going to need to share those requirements in a way that other teams can then use to create that as a deliverable. So we have an asset information model requirement. We have a team that's required to do a certain set of modeling and information properties that follow certain rules, and understanding the values must meet certain regulations, certain requirements. So how do we share that? Well, we can also export something in a machine readable format, and that's where the IDS comes in. So we've spent some time to create a scope. Now we want to share how to do that in a machine readable form. And in this example, we're going to export, so here the structural scope, and we're going to export the asset information requirements, and then maybe we will export just the contractor's needs. We can name this and etc., but I'm just going to create this, and then let's grab the file. So I want to download that file, and then I need to come out of this view and go to grab it and show you what that looks like. So now we've created a machine readable format that people can understand, and we can see that there might be a set of requirements that need to be understood and what the options are. So in this example were that, and actually I don't know whether the entity was added to this one, but you can see that the material has to be one of these values, and that is part of the set of requirements that now can be interpreted by a machine so that it's created in the form and meets those requirements. That also can be used to check the requirements. So if you had an IDS that you needed to check, you would also want to bring that into a tool like Planoly to be able to then verify that the model meets those requirements. So we've got all of these elements in here, maybe for the structural and also for the architectural work. And when we jump from the scoping into the verification step, we might have a tool like Celibri, or there's a bunch of other checking tools, and you could export the scope from Planoly into Celibri, for example, to be checked. But in this example, if we were to say that the asset information model is going to be checked for, I know that the contractor had some work and some potentially some work by the architect, and this set of tasks here are the ones that we want to check. Connecting or uploading, so you could drag and drop an IFC file into here. You could connect into a CDE. And in this example, we're going to grab a model that is in a project that we can say meets these requirements. We hope that this model meets the requirements. As the model gets dropped in, we obviously understand what's in the model and can see the model, but we also want to be able to understand whether those requirements have been met as well. So the model itself has to be related to the content in the specification. So there are a bunch of different ways to do this, but in this example, I'm going to use a rule to find certain elements that meet certain requirements and connect it automatically, and then check it against the requirements that we've set that were part of that export as the IDS.
So what we see on the left side on the vertical, those are these nice cards. Those are tasks actually, and each and every card represents a cell in the scope grid that we created. So a task per milestone. That's what we see here.
Yep, exactly. So the elevator doors was a task itself. It had certain requirements for properties, and those properties as well had maybe rules. And in this example, we're seeing that these 3 elevator doors that have been linked automatically, they have the properties, and we are 100% green. Whereas if we looked at something like the restroom flooring areas, they are only 33% complete. And we can see that even though the surface color is correct, but the durability is not a number from 1 to 5. And we can see that these are the ones that do not have that. Let's look at some other items that might be a bit more interesting. Here we go. So we've got interior walls, 98% complete. However, there are 4 instances here that do not have one of these values. So the values are present, but they are not meeting the values. And there are a whole bunch of other tools and processes using BCF and using a whole bunch of other things that you can start to maybe have an activity that you can go through the resolution process. A lot of that will come in further webinars. The real purpose of today was to talk through the concept of creating a scope, an understanding of what may be filtered for responsibility and for milestone, the deliverable, what needs to happen, the concept of exporting this in both a machine and also a human readable form and getting a contract for that filtered set of requirements, and then the ability to verify whether that set of requirements has been met and whether that model file is an IFC file coming from as a PLN from ArchiCAD or from Tekla or from Revit as a SketchUp file, as a DWG file. All of those different files can be aggregated inside of modeling tools, and also checked inside of tools like, as we mentioned, Celibri, and even inside of Planoly as well, to understand what those requirements and how well that is meeting the defined requirements. So let me jump back. We can cover a lot more. I realize that we are at the time, so we've got some resources to share as well. So a very quick recap. Project settings, being able to define and agree on which classifications and properties are going to be used needs to be simple. The ability to search without having to go to a PDF or an Excel file. This is directly searching the bSDD using an API, an application protocol, which basically directly finds from the provider rather than you having to set things up with external tools and systems and documents. And then being able to not just search for classifications, but also search for properties as well. This example with materials. When we define properties, we're needing sometimes to define the rules for which the values of those properties are going to be, and inside of whether it's a date and the format of a date, for example. And then being able to export this in a human readable and also machine readable form. So this is the IDS XML example. Being able to package this in repeatable so that we're not having to recreate this every single time. This example is for mechanical system for 3D coordination and requiring certain properties. And then also being able to understand whether this was or was not met based on that set of requirements as a specification. Akos, you have some resources to share. Let me
probably, yeah, we should
move the slides through.
without the resources. So first of all, bSDD, this is something that we integrate with, but following the link or the QR code, you will have the first-hand information about the data dictionary. So there's an explainer about it. And of course, you can also, just like we did, look into the dictionary itself and search and start testing it. We just mentioned Kobe, which is another big topic. And well, we also integrated with that and not only requesting, which is already a pretty big thing. So you can now start requesting Kobe in a meaningful way, not just saying that I need Kobe and LOD 500 models, but really going down to the details and finding out what is the piece of information that actually is needed from Kobe and is going to be used downstream. So it's really a release for the teams, but also we can generate the Kobe deliverables inside of Planoly. We have a webinar about it and some external partners are working on it. So I just recommend that one. ISO, the same kind of story. So you have to know that Planoly is an online platform framework filled with a lot of content, but this framework is helping you to really follow the principles of ISO 19650 plus not only as a framework, but we also have content that you can grab right away if you create a free account and can start using it, templates that helps you getting started and stay compliant with ISO 19650. And we have some webinars about that on this link. The workflow,
yep.
ISO 19650 workflow itself, the backbone, the heart of everything. So we are implementing that and is being implemented and simplified inside of Planoly, again, to help you getting started and staying compliant with this standard. And the templates that we mentioned, all the abbreviations, all the new terms and old terms that we are using in execution plans and BIM in general. So those are the templates that are being put together by hundreds of experts actually on a global scale, being translated into, I think now over 15 different versions. So if you search for different, or if you are needing in starting points, guidelines, and templates in ISO 19650, that's something that you find inside of the application, thanks to these teams who are putting it together for us.
Great. And I realize that we maybe have a bunch of Q&A that we can hang around for. And please also connect with us through it's not difficult to find us through social media or through the details that I think were put up at the start of the webinar. We look forward to your comments and suggestions and helping us improve the workflow and making the access to bSDD and the simplicity for IDS much easier to work with throughout our industry, because these are really, really important aspects that have been a thorn, a difficulty for a long time. And credit to buildingSMART and the team that really is starting to nail it. Yeah, it's fun now to be able to work with this and to really accelerate our industry together. Rara, are we ready to rock and roll with some questions? Did you have a chance to curate some?
Sure. Thank you very much, both Clive and Akos. Really helpful presentation, get people an insight into what you're working with. We've had a few questions initially that have been taken care of. I'll pull some out. So if you did cover them later, then do excuse me, but we'll see where we get to with some of the later questions. So first one from Joop van Motman. I understand that I can create an IDS this way. IDS in short describes which parameters should be attached to which object. Suppose I say that elements with an NLS FB encoding 21.10 must have the property is external. How then does Planoly determine which elements are one with this encoding? Which parameter or property is used for that? And can I choose that somewhere?
The short answer is you can choose it. You can set it up with a rule, and that could be defined based on anything in the model. So I think we went through that part very quickly, but if you set it and define that for your whole process and everyone follows the same workflow, it's just one simple rule that says use this property to connect with either this name or this code, and everything will sync inside of Planoly. If you're defining that and using the IDS as an export, then you are setting it based on the entity or the classification, and it will check everything with that, either that combination or whatever one you set up.
Brilliant. A question from Kara Ibrahim. Does Planoly have an integration with the design tools, for example, Tekla, Revit, or OpenRail?
That's a great question. I think I received an email about, I don't want to put a date on it, but very soon you'll see some at least add-ons for these tools being shared. Look out for that. Connect with us directly. So for example, a Revit add-on that will ingest an IDS from Planoly and others, so that it can then be used to automate the setup of a model. So yeah, that's the exciting part as well.
And IDS, the answer is partially to these questions, of course. IDS itself being the integration vehicle.
Perfect. Question from Pavel Blasak. Why do you test Revit, not output IFC file?
Yeah, it could be anything. So for us, it doesn't matter. They all are normalized. So whether you bring a Revit, an IFC, a PLN through IFC, we don't care which one it is.
Brilliant. IDS specifications depend closely on IFC. For example, what IFC entity for property we can define criteria for PSET. So how can you check IDS criteria on a Revit model?
So that's, yeah, for us, again, you're defining a set of requirements and exporting it following an IDS. It just so happens that Planoly is set up already understanding the concept of classification, understanding properties at a milestone. So that just fits so nicely into exporting an IDS. That workflow is very similar, if not the same, for it doesn't matter what you're following. So it works for any setup and any, so that's, I mean, that's a beautiful thing. It doesn't have to be an IFC file. However, if it's bSDD and IDS and buildingSMART, that would be the preferred vehicle.
Brilliant. And from Andre, IDS has a specific IFC mapping. How do you map it to all the other formats when checking?
So again, for IDS, you've got a way of defining what you're checking. So that again is the same for anything. And then a property with a value and a rule. And that doesn't matter whether it's an IFC file or whether it's a Revit file. You have the concept of an entity or an object within a classification structure and a property, and then being able to connect those with the objects and their properties and check against them. That's the same principle.
Thank you. And will it be possible to define material specific properties, because most properties are not an element but material specific?
Material as in a material as a property on an element, is that?
Yes, they would have to clarify that.
No. Okay, sorry. Could you say, I'm trying to find where that question is as well.
It's from Michael Joel. Could you elaborate,
define
Michael?
Material specific properties, because properties are not element but material specific. Okay, so maybe let's take that one and dig in more. Connect with us if you're interested. We'd love to hear from you. We're learning all the time as we are building better and better and more simple solutions to the challenges that we all experience. So yeah, if there's something that I'm missing completely, then get in touch.
Okay, we'll go on to Andy Ward, who says IDS allows verification of several different types of data, not just properties, e.g. verifying materials, attributes, classifications, as well as properties. Are you supporting all the facets in the specification and the verification processes?
So we are supporting the definition of these, and we are supporting the checking. So the answer is yes, through using bSDD to determine the starting point, and then using IDS to export all of that as a package, and then also check that set of requirements as well. So through different ways, yes, but maybe that's worth unpacking as well on a much more detailed review.
Question from Andrea Bonini. Can it support also data like IFC cost value or IFC task, IFC schedule for 4D, 5D?
No, not something that we have defined. Akash, any further comment on that?
We didn't talk about more generic use of the scope. So of course, we are very much focusing on building components, elements, and things like that. But the scope feature set also allows to define other tasks and deliverables outside of a BIM environment, which cannot necessarily go to an automated checking process, but the validation of information received can be, of course, done in a manual way as well. So as a project management solution, including non-BIM deliverables would also go through an approval process and a validation process.
Brilliant. Sonia's asked if the recording will be shared of the presentation, and I can confirm it will be. Would you like to answer any more questions? We still have a couple more.
Yeah, we can definitely hang out. I saw that the looking for a specific use case as well, which is a great question as well. I see that one that says, I can't think of a specific use for bSDD. Do you have any helpful information or links? I think that there have been some links shared, but the combination of both. Imagine that you require all walls to have a determination whether they are internal or external. Imagine that you have a need to check all precast concrete that is going into a restricted site is less than or smaller than a certain length, or shorter than a certain length, for example. There are a bunch of different potential uses that are entwined in the way that we do design construction today. And I'm sure that more and more use cases will be defined and standardized as part of this work as well. So it's what really is the fundamental, the building blocks to help us to not just define better specifications and ways to interpret them, but it's also the starting point, the foundation for us to really start to automate and understand those types of checks and package them up so that they can be more repeatable, so that not everyone has to create them every time.
Brilliant. A couple more questions then from Edgar. I understand you would require some kind of normalization. However, that is a black box to me if I have uploaded a .rbt file. What is to say the normalized model is correct?
What is to say the normalized model is correct? So I think that maybe that's more referring to a geometric interpretation, maybe. So the concept of an object that has properties in groups is a concept that our industry uses throughout a lot of different applications, and what the types of file formats, it doesn't necessarily matter. From an IFC perspective, you might have an entity with a property that is inside of a P set with a certain value. That concept just uses terminology from buildingSMART that also can be translated. If there's something specific, we'd love to again hear, and if there's some situations that don't fall into a specific rule set that has already been defined, then we'd love to hear that as well. They're all situations that will help the industry improve as well.
One last question from Joop van Wotman. I may have missed it. Is there already some kind of a Revit plugin that can import an IDS from Planoly?
Watch this space. Very soon. Yeah.
Well, with that, I'd like to bring this webinar to a close, and thank you very much, Clive Jordan and Akash Hamar, for your time and your presentations, and we look forward to your future work.
Thank you. Us too. We're really excited that we're starting such a partnership with buildingSMART, and yeah, there's some pretty magical things that can happen together. We're looking forward to it.
Brilliant. We're very excited to have you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you and goodbye.